All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to uncover a massive secret hiding in plain sight within one of the world's largest agricultural sectors. We are looking at a really fascinating study published in the International Journal of Business Administration, and it takes a hard look at the Brazilian sugarcane industry. It's a story about money, risk, and a fundamental business assumption that might just be completely wrong.
We naturally just assume that massive, large-scale farms are the most efficient and profitable ones, right? It's like a core tenet of business, economies of scale. The idea is super simple. The larger your operation, the lower your per-unit costs, and the higher your overall profit. It seems like common sense. But today, we are going to bust that myth wide open by looking at actual on-the-ground data from the producers themselves.
So here's how we're going to break it down today. First, Brazil's sugarcane empire. Then, how do we farm it? After that, the true cost of farming. Followed by simulating success, the profitability mystery, and finally, why bigger isn't better. Let's get to it.
Okay, part 1. Brazil's sugarcane empire, a true global heavyweight. Brazil is an absolute empire when it comes to this crop. They represent a staggering 39% of all global sugarcane production. I mean, we're not just talking about the sugar you put in your morning coffee here. This massive agricultural machine feeds the global bioenergy sector. It produces crucial biofuels like ethanol and even supplies intermediate raw materials for wholesale retail and animal feed industries. So when producers face falling sugarcane quality or adverse weather like droughts or frosts, the financial ripples are felt worldwide. The stakes for profitability here are just incredibly high.
Moving on to Section 2. How do we actually farm it? There are two main strategies here.
When producers are out there applying soil amendments, fertilizers, bug spray, all that stuff, they basically have to choose between two strategies. On one side, you've got the fixed rate system. This is your traditional approach, treating the whole field exactly the same and applying uniform amounts of chemicals based on just an average soil calculation. On the other side is the variable rate system. This is precision agriculture, where farmers apply inputs specifically based on the unique needs of a particular grid point or management zone in the field. And as we'll see in a second, the choice between these two methods drastically impacts a farmer's wallet, especially when you factor in the size of the farm itself.
Which brings us to Section 3, the true cost of farming. Where is all that money actually going?
Well, when researchers looked at the detailed cost structures of 55 different sugarcane producers, a pretty glaring reality popped up. Chemical and organic inputs, stuff like fertilizers and herbicides, they eat up over 70% of the total cost across all farm sizes. 70%! That completely dwarfs the costs of mechanization and labor, which sit at around 15% each. This really means that managing the cost of what you put into the soil is the single most critical factor for survival in this industry. So, let's test that age-old theory of economies of scale. If bigger is better, large farms should have the lowest per hectare costs, right? Well, wrong. The data actually shows that small-scale farms boast the lowest total costs at just $276 per hectare. Meanwhile, the large-scale guys, they are burning through up to $750 a hectare. Now sure, the large farms are utilizing more robust technological packages, but their overall expenditure is just massive compared to the leaner, small-scale operations. All right, Section 4, Simulating Success. Let's look at risk and revenue.
To completely take the guesswork out of this and avoid just relying on basic averages, the researchers utilized a really rigorous Monte Carlo simulation. Basically, this is a powerful mathematical technique that takes all those variable inputs, like mechanization, labor, and input costs, and runs them through 50,000 simulated harvest scenarios. 50,000! This allows us to not just guess at profits, but to predict the cumulative frequency and figure out the exact probability of a farm's financial success or failure. Now don't worry, you absolutely do not need to do the math yourself. But what you're seeing here is the exact equation they used to calculate the average results to find our profitability winner. It represents the simulation of the variable of interest over all 50,000 of those iterations. By projecting the net revenues minus the average production costs, the researchers were able to create an incredibly accurate financial forecast for small, medium, and large producers.
So let's get to the good stuff in Section 5, the profitability mystery. Who actually takes the crown? This right here is where the whole myth just completely shatters. If economies of scale were true for this industry, the large farm bar should be towering over the rest. But it isn't. The medium-sized producers take the absolute crown, generating the highest net revenue of $1,070 per hectare. The small and large farms are practically tied, trailing behind at $979 and $978 respectively. This definitively proves that in the complex world of Brazilian sugarcane, being the biggest absolutely does not mean making the most money. No way!
And honestly, the story gets even better for the medium-sized farmers. Not only did they make the most money, but they also hit the ultimate Goldilocks zone of risk management. The simulation showed that medium-scale farms boast a massive 97.4% certainty in hitting their revenue targets. 97.4. Now compare that to the large-scale farms, which have a highly volatile 45.6% certainty. The largest farms are essentially flipping a coin on their profitability, while the medium farms have locked in a near-guaranteed return.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 6. Bigger isn't always better. Time to rethink expansion. This quote right here from the study's conclusion just totally dismantles the myth. The researchers state it plainly. The presence of economies of scale was not confirmed. It's that simple. The small producers run the tightest ship when it comes to costs, and the medium producers have mastered the balance of scale and efficiency to extract the absolute highest net revenue. The assumed business rule of economies of scale simply does not apply here.
So what should you really take away from all this? Well, finding the perfect balance beats sheer size, hands down, every single time. It really makes us rethink everything we know about scaling up a business. It leaves us with a pretty compelling thought. If this massive, multi-billion-dollar agricultural sector has been operating under a myth, making us realize that medium-scale efficiency is the true Goldilocks zone, where else in the global economy is this myth waiting to be busted? What other industries out there are just blindly expanding, completely unaware that they're actually shrinking their own profitability? Think about that the next time you hear a company talk about expanding just for the sake of getting bigger.